Okay, so we're going to have a look at this lab here, which is investigating the setup of AWS server instances and also how we can secure them. So you should find that you should be enrolled onto a lab, and we'll use this within the AWS Academy Learner Lab. Okay, so we'll just get started. So the environment you should find is this. So this is just like a standard Linux terminal here. We can run Python here if we want. And so just that. And we can list our files just as we would in Linux. Okay, so this gives us our basic terminal that we could use for any scripting that we're going to identify. But the first thing we do is we start the lab. And it just takes a few seconds to start the lab up. And then what we should find is that this will go green and we'll be able to use our AWS Management Console. Okay, so if you're interested, you can view all the services that are there for AWS. We've got Ec2, which is the compute engine. Lambda allows us to script services without actually having a server. S3 is for S3 data buckets. RDS for database. We can have things like cloud. Cloud. If I just find, we can have our networking services for VPCs and so on. CloudFront for putting our content at the edge of the cloud. But we'll just look at EC2 in this lab. Okay, so once you're in there, then you can actually view your instances that you've created, any IP addresses that you've allocated, and also we'll have a look at the security groups later on. AMIs are Amazon machine instances, and they allow you to be able to create an instance from these AMIs. We can also have our storage area where we have all our volumes that are connected onto our virtual machines, and these relate to the security settings that we'll have a look at later. Okay, but that's the main elements to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a Linux server, and then I'm going to create a Windows server, and hopefully we can secure those. So we'll go ahead and we'll create a new instance. Okay, and I'm going to call it my Linux server 2. Okay, so we'll just go for the Amazon Linux instance. It's quite a good instance, but we can select many different types, such as Mac OS, Ubuntu, Windows, Red Hat, and so on. But I'll just go for this one here. An SSD is the disk that we're going to mount. We'll go for a 64-bit instance, and you can select here which type of instance you want. We're not going to be using it for very much, so we'll go for a free tier instance. It only has 1 gig of memory and 1 CPU, so it's going to be quite slow relatively. If we were going for something in production, we'd probably be using medium or large or so on. But obviously it has a different cost. For Linux, it's $0.01 US per hour for this one. So just go with that. Okay, and you can look at the comparison here if you want. Now we'll create a new key pair. So let's give our key pair my key pair 2. Okay, so we'll take the defaults. This has my private key in it, and the public key will be put on the instance so that when we connect, we can verify with the private key. So we'll create that, and you can see here it's actually put the key in my downloads file folder. Okay, we're going to create a security group, and with this the only traffic that's allowed is SSH for anywhere. Obviously in production we wouldn't have that because that allows anybody to connect through SSH. So later on we can lock that down into a certain address, IP address, or a certain subnet. So everything's good there, and we'll go for an 8 GB hard disk, and that's fine. So we'll just launch that instance. Okay, so it just takes a little minute. This is the instance ID here. So this is how we'll refer to the instance once it's created. Okay, so we'll just click here, and then eventually it should start up. This is the public IP address, and then this is the private IP address. With NAT, we map that address onto the public IP address. There'll only be one service that's running on it just now, or that we can access, and that's SSH. We have a DNS, public DNS here for our instance. Yep. Or we can use the public IP address. Okay, so this is the basic setup that we have here, and we can see it's now running. So our server is running. We can have a look at the security groups, and what we'll find is that the only port that's open on the firewall is port 22 for any instance. Okay, so obviously eventually we would lock that down. Okay, an important element is the region that we're running this in, and we should find that in this case we're running in North Virginia, which is US East 1. So now what we're going to do is that we're going to open up the firewall. So if we check, if we ping the IP address of the instance we've just created, then we can see that it's not pinging. It is alive, but we need to open up the firewall. Okay, so we'll just go here, and then we need to set up our security group here, and we're going to edit the inbound rules, add a rule. We can see the SSH is already enabled, and we'll make it Icmp, and we'll allow every computer to connect, and we'll save that there. Okay, so that's it applied. So now hopefully when you ping, then it works. Okay, so that's allowed us to be able to open up Icmp for the instance. Obviously we might want to lock that down to only certain computers from there. Okay, so now we're going to access our instance to be able to log into it. So let's go back to our instances, and here's my new instance that I've created. So I now want to connect to it. So I'll press the connect here, and there are a number of ways that we can connect to our instance. We're going to go for the SSH client initially, and for this we need to use our private key that we've created. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change mod for just find my key. And it's there. So I'm going to move that into a folder I've created, so you don't have to do this, but just make it easier. So then I'm going to go into this folder here, and I'm going to lock my my key down with a 400, which is only read only for me. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect with SSH. You can also connect with other systems, but we'll just connect through here. So the command prompt has already been created for me. The user is Ec2 user, and that's the public DNS of my instance. So we'll connect, and we'll say yes here. And that's us connected into our instance. Okay, so quite quick to be able to do that. So we'll just have a look at the IP address to see what it is, and we can see that it is this address here, 172.31, which should tie up to what we saw on the summary page. So we'll just see if we've got connectivity, and we do. That's fine. And there should also be a hidden folder here called .ssh, and in here, if you cat that, you should see that it's got the public key that we're connecting from our private key. So this is the file that's authenticating us onto the instance. The other way that we can connect is through the instance connect here. Okay, so here's the IP address, and I'm going to connect in with Ec2 user. And there we are. So that's the file. So what I'll do is I'll create directory test, I don't know, one.txt. Oops. Then I'll save that and cat it. Okay, and I'll go over here. There's test. There we go. So this console is a convenient way to be able to get access to our instance without using the SSH terminal that we have here. Okay, so it's up to us which one we want to use now, so we'll just go over here and we'll do a net start. Now what we'll do is we'll install an HTTP server on our instance. Okay, so in fact we should be able to copy and paste. Paste that in. And that's it. So that should have created our web server. So now what we need to do is to connect to the public IP address. and we should find that we can't connect to it. And the reason for that is that port 80 and 443 are blocked. So again, we'll go back to our firewall, go here, and we want to open up port 80. And we can also open up port 443. That's fine. And we'll allow access to all. Okay, so that's us opened up the firewall port. And we can see now that we can get access to the web server running there. The next thing we can do is to have a look at the auditing. So for that we go into var, then log, and we should have a file called secure there. And this is it's typically the folder which will have the SSH login details. You can also have a look at boot.log. Just use our sudo. That's for secure. And we can look at boot.log. And you can see that's the boot file. Now we'll have a look at the file So we need to go into HTTPD and we can have a look at access. So this is the access log that we see for our accesses, and what we should be able to find is that we should be able to map what we see here to the web accesses that we connect to. If we now try to connect to a page which doesn't exist, so just test.html, that's not there, and we go back here, then hopefully inside our access log we'll see a 404 for the page that has been accessed. So we can see test.html doesn't exist and we got a 404, but then if I now try again, then hopefully we'll see the new access there. In this case it's a 403 for that one. Okay, so next we'll add a new user. And then what we can do is that we can enable a login for that user to be from a password rather than the private key. And we'll edit this file for that to happen. And we need to find the password authentication part. Save that. And then what we'll do is we'll restart the service for SSH. Oops. So I just need to modify that. And there we go. So now let's log in through SSH with the new user. So it's SSH Napier at, and then we need the IP address, which is 18.28.109.171. Yes. And there we go. So you can see that's the new login that we've got, that we've created, and that's in /home. So if I go back here, and then we can see here is the new user, and I obviously need to do a sudo for that one. There. Okay, so that shows how we can create a new user, and we don't need the PEM file anymore for that login. But obviously it's good for the EC2 user to have that private key to authenticate. Now we'll go back here, and we can also use the AWS prompt to be able to perform our operations. So EC2 describe instances will actually show us our instances that are running. So that's the unique ID, there's the instance type, which is micro, that's the key pair name, and we should see other things about our instances. Obviously that's not the one we've created. That's the one that we've created there. So there's the ID, the AMI identifier, the instance type, the key pair, when it was created, launched, and what its public IP address is, and what its private IP address is. One thing we should have had a look at was yeah, the private IP address is the 172 there. Okay, what we can do now is that we can actually stop the instance. So we'll find the identifier for the instance. It's there. And now what we can do is AWS Ec2 Stop Instances. Stop. If we go back to our console, we can see here that our server is stopping, so we can still get access to it just now, but you can see now we've been locked out, so the instance has now stopped. Yep. So I can go back to the terminal and then I'll start the instance now. Okay, again we go back here, we just refresh, and you can, it's pending, so it should start up in a little minute. And this allows us to be able to script the starting and stopping of the instance. Should get there in a little minute. Okay, that's it running. Then what we can do is that it's possible for us to stop the instance and then change the instance type. So if we needed to upgrade our server, so we can stop. And then once it's stopped, we can change the instance type. So we'll change it from micro to small. Okay, from micro. T2 dot T2 dot micro. Yeah, we'll change it from T2 nano to micro. Well, it's actually micro just now, but we'll change it to nano. No, to small, sorry. So we'll change it to small. Okay, so our instance type is changed. And then what we can do is that we can restart it. And now we will have more memory for our virtual machine. But we need to stop it first to do that. Okay, so it's just doing it. And we can also do this with our scripts. Okay, so that's it running, and we can see the instance type is small now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a Windows instance. We'll call it my Windows Server 2. And we'll go for Windows. We'll take a basic 2022 server. Again, we can select our type. We'll go for micro, which has only got one CPU and 1 gig of memory, but that's fine. And now we'll just use the same key pair as we used the last time. And we're going to connect to it with RDP, and we can see here that we can connect anywhere with RDP. We've gone for a 30 gigabyte hard disk. That's fine, and then we'll just create that. This time we're going to use RDP to be able to connect. Okay, here are some of the details. It's just getting created just now, but we should have a public IP address and a private IP address. Okay, so here's the public IP address and the private one. First thing we're going to do is we're going to enable the Icmp again on the instance. We just wait for it to start up. That's it running, and we should find that we shouldn't be able to ping it because the firewall is obviously closed for that port. Okay, so we'll just quit that, and we'll open up the firewall. Okay, so we go into security groups again, and then we'll add in a rule for Icmp, and again 0.0.0/32, and that's ping all. Okay, what we should find is that we can't actually ping just now, and the reason for that is that Windows has got a firewall on that stops it from being pinged. So once we get in, we'll be able to change that. So we'll go back here, instances, and now we want to go to our Windows server here, and we're going to connect to it. Okay, so rather than use the SSH as we do with Linux, we use an RDP client. So this is the login details that we've got, and we've got to generate the password now. So for this, we've got to upload our key pair that was used to generate the instance, and the initial password on the virtual machine is this. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll create an RDP connection. So this is the public DNS. Okay, so it's administrator. copy the password here. If you want to see, there it is. So yes, and we should be able to connect in, and this will give us our Windows 2022 machine. It's obviously quite underpowered because it's only got 1 gig of memory and 1 CPU, virtual CPU, but it should be usable. Okay, so it's just getting set up. Once it's set up, we'll have a look at the IP address on the machine. Obviously, if we had more memory, it would run much faster. And we should see the AWS details coming up in a little minute. There we go. Right, so if we look at IP config, there we go. There's our public IP address, our private IP address. And we'll just see if we've got connectivity. Good, everything's fine there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to enable the firewall for Icmp. So for that, we want to get our advanced firewall, and we're going to enable Icmp. So we're looking at inbound rules. File sharing, echo request, enable rule. That's fine. Okay, so now let's try again. See if we've got the right IP address. Let's check our security again. Alright, okay. There's Icmp. I put in a /32, that's wrong. So let me edit that. That's wrong. It should be a /0. Got there. That should be fine now. Okay, so we can see it's now working. Okay, so we had to open up the firewall on AWS, but we also had to open up the firewall on the virtual machine. Okay, so netstart -i will give us the services that are running from there. So there's one there, and that's obviously the RDP connection that I'm using just now. So what we'll do is we'll now open up the server manager, and we'll enable the web server on Windows. Again, it can be quite slow. And we'll add a role, and the role we'll add is IIS server. Okay, so we can see that's it now working. So our local host, the web server, is now running. So what we'll do is we'll open up the port 80 to allow us to get access to the web server from outside. Okay, so again, we'll set up for anybody. Save the rules. So our public IP address is this. And that's it there. So we can see that we've managed to get access to the web server. So what we'll do now is that we'll go back to our virtual machine, our instance, and then on Windows the server is placed here, and the file that we start with is this one here. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and we'll change this file. Just to test it. Save. And there we go. Okay, so a little bit blue, but we can obviously change that. Okay, so this is showing that our main website is working. So now we want to actually have a look at the audit of this. So that's in logs, log files, W3, and we see here we have a log file. Okay, so these are the accesses that we've had, and again, if we access the wrong page, then hopefully when we look at this log we'll see an error, a 404 error. It's not quite came through yet, but there should be a 404 error that will appear in this file. Okay, so if we want, we can change the user administrator account here with net user. So the final part is that we'll look at how we can use Python to be able to script our instances. So again, there is a folder called AWS, and within there is a credentials file. You should find when you look at your AWS details that the credentials that are in there, when you cat them, then they should be the same as the ones that are appearing there. But because we have this file, we can go ahead and we can run a Python and it will log in with the details that are contained in there. So for this we have two identifiers, AWS access key ID and AWS secret key access key. So we'll try the Python file from here. again, this is we can import the Boto library, and this will allow us to be able to access our instances. So I'm just going to create a little Python file here, paste that in, and this will describe all the instances that we're running. So Python 3, got the py. Let me just modify it. With a print statement. And that's it there. Okay, so those are the instances that I'm running just now, or those are the instances I've created. So I can also I can stop an instance. So let's stop the Windows instance that we just created. So I just need to get its ID from here. Run Python 3 stop.py. So let's actually have a look to see if it's stopped. And you can see it's stopping here. Okay, eventually it will stop, because we've run the script and we shouldn't be able to get access to a remote desktop. You can see it's disconnected there. Try again until it's stopped, and once it's stopped we'll run a Python script to be able to start it back again. Okay, so I'm just going to put my instance ID there. Just wait to see. So it stopped. Okay, so now I'll go here and I'll run my Python 3 just to show you the code. Start instances. Python 3 start py. Okay, so we go back here. Obviously we can do this with the command prompt too. So you can see it's pending. Should just get there in a minute. And it's running again. So we should be able to connect back into it if we need to with our RDP. We can also use the command prompt here for AWS. Okay, and I'll just paste the instance ID here. So it should now be stopping. And it is. And then when it starts back up, when it stops, then I'll start the instance again. So we should be able to get access to this website. Stopped, and then I'll start the instance back. And everything should be good. Okay, so there was 3 ways that we could actually start and stop instances and even create them. One is from the the management console, the other is from Python or from a scripting language, and the third is from our command line prompts. Okay, so this one should just start up again. Just wait for it. When it starts back up, then it will be given a new IP address unless you want to assign a static IP address to it. So it's still pending. It's now running. And there is our website backup again. If I stop that instance, then we'll find that the web server is not accessible anymore. Okay, so that's been an introduction to AWS services.